As the great Mig Meal once said from his Dreams and Nightmares album, you thought I was finished? Oh, you thought we were going to have a downtick in news now that we're in this extended period of time where we have to go without watching significant college football. But oh, baby, have we been proven wrong here in these early moments of that O word that I will not dare utter here on this channel. If you want to hear that O word, you might have to go somewhere else. Welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast, your source of college football. Taking a look at the college football landscape from that 50,000 foot altitude type of angle. And we are here on a very sunny and warm Friday afternoon here in the Buckeye State, recording this on the 2nd of February. And very excited to get into this one. We got some drama with the NCAA. You already know I want to jump into that here tonight. I've also got some thoughts on the situation up in Boston College in regards to what Boston College should do next. And then, of course, we got these early winners and losers of the transfer portal, plus an alliance being formed for the two biggest conferences in college football right now. So even though we're in that old word, we got a lot to talk about. I hope you're excited for the whole thing because, oh, baby, I certainly am. And I hope you guys are excited for it. If you are, make sure you go ahead and smack that like button because that does help me out. The YouTube algorithm gets this video out to more college football fans like yourself. So I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. In addition to that, I would also appreciate it if you're brand new and you're enjoying the vibes, make sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. You have a chance to be an A1 since day one. Come join a new community that's being built from the ground up because we're not afraid to talk about these smaller conference teams either. Don't you worry about a thing. So that being said, we cannot waste a single moment. We got some drama out there in the NCAA world, that's for sure. Now, with that being said, and I know I have a different sweatshirt on, sue me. We got some drama going on over with the NCAA. So, if you guys remember when we first started this channel back up, we were talking about some of the allegations that Tennessee were facing in that, well, what's some casual to say, the previous offseason. And what came out of those allegations was that they were essentially going to be put on probation and they were going to be fined. Well, the NCAA, they're going to be at it yet again. And the NCAA, here's the thing about the NCAA, right? They didn't even tell Tennessee that they were investigating the matter. They had to do it through a spokesperson and, through these media outlets. The NCAA hasn't even sent out a notice of allegations to Tennessee, but the NCAA is looking into them. They are looking into them once again. And here's the gravity of the situation in all of this, right? Because of the fact that they are under probation, if the NCAA does end up finding that Tennessee did have some wrongdoings yet again, then the program could face more severe punishments. We're talking about the possibility of bowl bans, forfeiture of wins, even more scholarships being reduced. So it's very imperative that the University of Tennessee comes out of this unscathed because there could be severe consequences if they don't. Now, as for what Tennessee is dealing with, it is based off of the NIL collective rules that are in place. That being said, though, what we've seen in the past is that whenever the NCAA comes at your door, usually you see programs cooperate with the investigation. You kind of what a dog does to many kind human beings. They roll on their backs and expose the belly. Let it be known that you're not a threat. Well, University of Tennessee, they are not doing that at all. They are going scorched earth. They are going hard back at the NCAA. And this is not just their university president saying that what the NCAA doing is wrong. This is not just the athletic director at the University of Tennessee saying, oh, what the NCAA is doing is wrong. legal minds are starting to get involved in this as well. You got both the assistant district attorney for Tennessee, or the attorney general at Tennessee, and the attorney general of the state of Virginia. Both those two states have collaborated in a lawsuit against the NCAA in regards to, the student athlete pay. Now, in the NCAA, in their case, the NCAA, at least as of recent, has not had a very good track record of winning in the courtrooms, at least as of recent. Remember back a few years ago when they lost over the idea of amateurism, and this really opened up this floodgate of NIL becoming a thing in the first place. They lost that just a few years ago. That's how we got NIL that we have today. Just a couple of months ago, we've also had the situation in where the schools and I think a couple of states also got involved in suing the NCAA over the two-time transfer rule. And the NCAA lost that. So now you see, the two-time transfers that are playing able to step on courts and step on football fields around the country. In some cases, a handful of players were able to play in bowl games because of the reversal in the courtrooms that are happening around America right now. So you have all of this happening, and it just goes to show, really, I think what many of you are thinking, there needs to be effective rules and regulations and just consistency with how NIL is regulated, how the transfer portal is regulated as well, because those two things could make some of the more high profile coaches in our industry right now, they could leave a little bit earlier than anticipated because of how we're kind of in this Wild West kind of mentality right now. But the NCAA and what we have seen them do, they are just simply not effective at getting that job done at all. The very thing that is supposed to empower student athletes, is supposed to look out for the best interests of student athletes, it's not there. It is not effective really at all. And it's part of the reason why you start to see, for example, the Big Ten, the SEC. I think it was announced literally on the ESPN app today. You see the SEC and the Big Ten form an alliance, so to speak, not the same scheduling alliance that you see the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have a couple of years ago. Big Ten ends up stabbing the Pac-12 in the back, but that's a different conversation. This is to look at some of those critical issues. We're starting to move over to a direction of where we have maybe a college football commissioner in place at some point, because the NCAA is not capable of enforcing their own rules that they place. And this is really the hardy issue of why the university president at Tennessee has such an issue with the NCAA, why multiple attorney generals are going after the NCAA, why you have the athletic director going after the University of Tennessee right about now. It's because of those things. It's because of the lack of consistency. And if you're really any school, and Tennessee made the same argument as well, if you're going to punish us for these NIL rule breaking allegations, you got to look at most of these other schools in the country right now, because most of these other schools are dealing with the same thing, at least in major college football, right? You have this constant moving of the goalposts because we've had very little time actually going out designing, okay, how is NIL actually going to work while we're protecting the student athletes? How can these student athletes get paid while at the same time it's being regulated properly so that it doesn't create too much of a competitive advantage or disadvantage? Well, the NCAA never did that because they never gave up an inch. And forward thinkers back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, I heard this on the Late Kick show with Josh Pate earlier today, actually, is if you don't give up an inch now, you're going to pay for it a lot later. And the NCAA, they were very firm on how they viewed amateur athletes in the NCAA structure. They should not be paid outside of their scholarships that they receive from these institutions, as well as any financial aid that they may receive as well. Well, we now see the ramifications of that. They didn't give up an inch or didn't even give up a little bit. And because they didn't even think about a time where NIL actually becomes a thing, they have no idea, absolutely no idea how to deal with it. And we're seeing the ramifications of that now. So I'm sure this is going to play out in the courts. The NCAA, I know it, you know it as well. Who knows what they're going to do? It's literally like spinning a wheel of discipline. Um, your guess is as good as mine, but I'm deeply worried about what's going to come out of this, and it makes you think that we are seeing really the straw that breaks the camel's back at this point. There's always been little inklings of the NCAA starting to disintegrate, but we're starting to get to a point where, hey, maybe the NCAA is truly coming to an end here relatively soon, at least in its role in college football. Maybe in other sports, it might be served a little bit better for other sports, but for college football, it might be coming to an end in the sense that we are seeing the Big Ten, we are seeing the SEC come together and form this alliance. And I want to talk about this alliance because we know that they're going to be the two biggest conferences in college football. We've lived under this guise of a Power Five structure for an incredibly long time, at least as long as I can remember since I was born. Going into the 2000s, there was at least this idea of a Power Five. Maybe you can argue a Power Six structure back in the 2000s when the Big East was playing football, but ever since the Big East was ultimately demoralized and demolished, we've been living under this Power Five structure for quite some time. So, but now we see the Pac-12 is effectively gone. It still exists as a conference, but only Oregon State and Washington State are the only two teams in that conference right now. Who knows what the next move for the Pac-12 is going to be if the Pac-12 wants to continue to exist in any capacity. In addition, you also have, even within the Power Four, per se, if we even want to go that route, there is a clear divide at this point. Not as much of a divide as we're going to see, I think, this upcoming season. The SEC has 16 teams. The Big Ten has 18 teams. To give you an idea of how big that conference is going to be, if you fired up NCAA 14, you can't even put all of the teams in a single conference anymore if you try to realign based off of the current conference structure that we are going to have going into the 2024 season. And this also can apply for the ACC as well, although their pickups were not nearly as high profile. ACC picking up Stanford, Cal, and SMU. SMU may be a program on the rise. I respect what they're doing at SMU, champions of the American Conference, by the way, but it's not the big pickups at the Big Ten yet. They didn't get a Washington who ends up going to the national championship game. Oregon, who's finishing as a top 10 team, as well as USC and UCLA, who bring their own set of pros to the table, such as that Los Angeles market. Big advantage there for those that participate in that NIL game, and it's easy to sell warm weather in California when you're recruiting in the transfer portal as well. That always sells, regardless of whether you're going after high school kids or whether you're going after seasoned college football players. For the SEC, they picked up Texas and Oklahoma. Texas winning a national championship back in the 2000s. Oklahoma being right there, a very consistent 10-win program, one of the blue bloods of college football. They just haven't gone over that last ultimate hump. But the SEC and Big Ten, they are going to get together because, frankly, they lost faith, in my opinion, in the leadership of the NCAA. They don't think they can solve what's going on with the rampant realignment that's going on, partially caused by their own conferences, but it is what it is. NIL needs some help. I truly believe that we need some better regulation in NIL just so that we have some form of consistency that we're working through. So make sure that we're all on the same page and also making sure that these student athletes are being compensated fairly because these student athletes, particularly for football and basketball, they are making a significant amount of money for their respective universities, especially if you're looking at that high end of Division One. At the same time, we do also need regulation at transfer portal. I actually did not mind the NCAA having that two-time transfer rule, having it to where, okay, first time around, because listen, I remember being a college kid. I did stupid things when I was in college, right? I truly remember those things, right? It's not too long ago since I was in college, so I remember doing dumb stuff. 17, 18-year-old kids are not going to make the best decisions. That's just the end all be all of that. Nothing wrong with that. Most of 17, 18-year-old kids are good kids at heart. They just don't make the best decisions sometimes. So if you want to transfer one time, I never had a problem with that. I do have a problem if you trying to transfer 2, 3, 4 times and then still being able to be eligible the next year. Because at this point, it's not a dumb decision. Now you're just trying to game the system, in my opinion. So I didn't mind the NCAA having the two-time transfer rule where, okay, you're allowed to transfer a second time, but unless you meet these specific standards, which again, leads to another reason why I think the Big Ten and the SEC are losing faith. The idea of the waiver was not a bad idea. It was the execution of enforcing the waiver and how it was approved or denied. That was the issue. That was legitimately the issue because you have some guys that would legitimately meet all of the requirements to be eligible to play right away, and yet either it would be delayed, such as in basically in the situation of Tez Walker of North Carolina. He didn't play for at the beginning of the season because his waiver was being held up for so long. It got denied, and then magically it gets approved because the NCAA was trying to say, "Oh, you should have filed your paperwork properly." They did. You just messed up. You can't admit to making a mistake. That's the problem. That's the core issue at heart. It's the lack of consistency, like the waiver. And then you have some guys that would get approved right away, like JT Daniels, who played at his fourth school in Rice, was able to play right away. How he's able to make that happen, I don't know. I'm glad he's able to play. Don't get me wrong. Rice, I'm sure, was happy to be that he was able to play, led them to a bowl game, didn't play in the bowl game because of medical issues. But again, that's really the issue at heart. So better enforcement of the transfer portal, better enforcement of the NIL. We'll see if this leads to a creation of a college football commissioner and a commissioner's office down the line, because it's getting out of hand. It truly is getting out of hand. Man, every time I talk about the NCAA, it just gets me riled up. It grinds my gears. So I'm going to get off of it before I go on this rant a little bit. I literally could rant for a full hour if I legitimately wanted to. I don't want to, but I could. I truly could. We spent a lot of time talking about that transfer portal. Now, even with all the coaching situations that we have been seeing right now with what's going on with Boston College and UCLA, we'll get onto that a little bit more at the moment. Even with the coaching carousel still going, we're actually not seeing a lot of movement in the transfer portal. So we do have a couple of guys that we might have talked about earlier make their respective decisions in the transfer portal. Couple of Washington kids that did end up entering and or making a decision since the last time that we chatted here on the Any Given Saturday podcast. Couple of Washington kids. Gurian Hatchett is one of those kids. He's a 4-star. He came into the college ranks as a 4-star offensive lineman. He did get downgraded to 3 stars in the transfer portal update. He does have a couple of years remaining of eligibility. And this was a kid that did contribute to that Washington offensive line. While he wasn't a kid that was constantly started, he did start in 4 games out of 15. He did play in 12 of 15 games, missed those over 3 games because of injury, not because he was, not good or anything. So Gurian Hatchett, he entered the transfer portal on the 17th. He is ending up going to the University of Washington, to Oklahoma. He's going to Oklahoma to maybe play for his next 2 years. I think this is a really nice. No, Old Miss. I have that written down wrong. Old Miss. Wow, we cannot read. Good pickup. Old Miss is able to continue to bring in quality offensive linemen. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. Another kid that is not going to follow Kellen DeBoer to Alabama, going to now fellow SEC conference team Oklahoma. Good pickup for the Oklahoma Sooners, who got a kid that started and played in the national championship game. Other kid that I wanted to talk about is Vincent Holmes. He's a safety that's also at Washington. He's a 4-star kid, was only there for a year. So his true freshman year, he played in the only 4 games this year. So he was able to preserve his red shirt. So he'll have 4 years remaining. He also has special teams experience. So Vincent Holmes does have plenty of upside still in terms of his college football aspirations. No crystal ball on him yet. So where could Vincent Holmes possibly go since there isn't a crystal ball on him? I think there's a few places that I feel would make sense as a recording of this podcast. Oregon State and Stanford wouldn't be a bad idea if he wants to continue to play power conference football. But realistically, I think this is going to be a 2-team race. And it's dependent on what he values more. Does he value wanting to remain closer to home? Or does he want to follow the head coach that recruited him? That's really the $1,000,000 question. If he does want to stay closer to home, I think Cal would make a lot of sense. Cal is, of course, a program that I do think is on the rise. I think Cal, winning 6 games, I think is a step in the right direction. Got the most of the core players of Cal coming back, and Vincent Holmes could help out with that defense as well. And that could help Cal continue to get better into 2024 and not only make a bowl game, but maybe pull off a big upset or two in the ACC in 2024. I think that is certainly a possibility. And like I said, Vincent Holmes can remain closer to home. He is a California kid. But if he wants to follow Kalen DeBoer, I'm sure that is something in the back of his mind. Might be looking at Alabama as well. We'll just have to wait and see what his priorities are and where he ends up going. But if he goes to Cal or Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I'm also looking at Oregon State and Stanford, like I said. Definitely a couple of dark horses. We'll see what he decides to do later on down the line. But now that we see that the transfer portal is starting to die down a little bit, what I really wanted to take the opportunity to do is I really wanted to take a look at least early on, who are the winners and losers of the transfer portal. Now, before I get into this, I do want to acknowledge Ohio State as well as the Boise State Broncos. Boise State, listen, we know that Boise State, brought some pretty good names in through the transfer portal. We all know this to be a thing. Boise State is going to be a popular pick. They really will. They will absolutely be a popular pick in terms of not only winning the Mountain West, they're defending champions of the Mountain West after all, but also secondarily, now that we have this 12-team playoff, there is the distinct possibility as well that we see Boise State make it to the college football playoff. Because all they have to do, especially if they stick with the 6-6, so like we go to a 5-7, if you're the best group of 5 champion, you're automatically in this college football playoffs. So there's some room for Boise State to operate. I think they're going to be a popular pick to not only win the Mountain West, but also win a chance to go to the college football playoff. I think those are in the cards. And then, of course, Ohio State. Ohio State, I want to acknowledge them as well. They signed some big-time players. While they only ended up signing 7 separate players in the portal, they got some dudes in this transfer portal. Julian Sains going to be a quarterback in the future. Caleb Downs, freshman All-American. He's coming to Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ole Miss, coming. Seth McClellan, interior offensive lineman that started in the semifinals of the national championship game. He's coming to the Buckeyes. And then they have their quarterback for right now in Will Howard coming to Ohio State. So Ohio State, they loaded up in this transfer portal. They saw Michigan win a national championship one time. It's like, all right, that's enough. So I did want to mention those 2 teams real quickly, but I didn't want to lump them into that winners category because it does feel like a little bit of a cop-out. I wanted to take this time to really look more towards teams that maybe aren't as talked about necessarily, but taking into account what they also lost in the transfer portal, I thought they also did a pretty good job. So with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's jump into the winners and losers of the transfer portal. And I love winners. You love winners. We all love winners, baby. So we're going to talk about those winners first. And let's talk about a team that, according to the on-free transfer portal interface, this team is currently the #1 recruiting class in the transfer portal when also accounting for people that are leaving the program. And that is the Louisville Cardinals. Now, the Louisville Cardinals, they added some blue chip guys. They ended up adding 8 total blue chip guys in this transfer portal. They also ended up adding 16 free stars. They generally, not only did they bring more people in than Louisville had leaving the program, but the average player that is coming into the program through the transfer portal is better than the players that are ultimately leaving. So while it may not reflect in your record is not always what it says you are. And that's really evident in how schedules are made up. Louisville's going to have a tougher schedule in 2024. That will happen. But even though their schedule might be tougher and they might have a lesser record because of that, this might be an even better team than last year. Because, man, they brought in some pretty good players through this transfer portal. Tyler Barron, for example, really good edge rusher out of Tennessee, was a Knoxville, Tennessee kid. He's coming to play for Louisville his last year in college football, most likely. He's a 2020 recruit. In other news, Dave McCullough from Oklahoma, he's coming over as well. Panay Boone had a big-time season at Toledo. He was tearing it up in the MAC. He's coming to Louisville now. Panay Boone's going to be a huge add to that Louisville backfield moving forward. You also have guys like Monroe Mills, an offensive tackle, because you got to have some good offensive linemen. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. Absolutely not. Got to have some good offensive linemen for sure. Colin Lacey, wide receiver. They got some weapons now. They add some weapons. Colin Lacey, Don Shaney Jr. out of Miami. It's going to be a sneaky good team, man. It's going to be a sneaky good team. And that's not even mentioning, guys like Jordan Garrard, Corey Forden out of FIU and UCF, respectively. That's big. You'll love to see that. And yeah, it's just and For Griffith, which great name, by the way. For Griffith was a 0-star recruit. For Griffith is now considered a 4-star after being adjusted for a transfer portal. He's a Harvard grad, and he's out here playing his last year at Louisville. Oh, and not to mention probably the most important of all, Tyler Shaw. So they'll have an established quarterback. got him from Texas Tech. This is a great class. This is a great recruiting class, and I can see why Louisville has that number one team in the country when it comes to the transfer portal. Now, they're obviously not the only team that has been busy in the transfer portal as well. They are not too far behind them. We know Deion Sanders. He's a huge fan of that transfer portal. The Colorado Buffaloes, which, by the way, Colorado primarily recruits his players through the transfer portal. He doesn't really mess with high school recruiting that much, which I understand the why. Why take a risk on a 17, 18-year-old kid when you can get players that have experience handling the rigorous preparation that is required to play college football at a high level? So I wholeheartedly get it by all means. That being said, Colorado right now has got the number 2 class, according to On3, best recruiting class in the Big 12. Colorado also doing a nice job loading up here yet again. They're getting better as a roster. They're going to be better. Now, Colorado is going to have a difficult schedule in the Big 12. They're going to play the top 5 odds makers for being a Big 12 champion. So, not a guarantee that Colorado is going to go to a bowl game. Not saying that at all, but Colorado is going to get better. Issue that Colorado had was in the trenches. And oh, baby, did they work those trenches pretty well. Just looking at the line talent. BJ Green, a 2021 commit to Arizona State. He's coming to Colorado. He was a bright spot for what was a really egregious Arizona State squad. They also managed to pick up Philip Houston out of FIU, Chidie Nwankwo, a defensive lineman out of Houston, Samuel Akula from Pittsburgh. That's a hard-nosed town. That's a hard-nosed town right there. In addition, you got Anquan Barnes coming from Alabama. You also have Quincy Wiggins, the LSU transfer, coming in, playing edge. Keaton Wade playing edge. He comes from Kentucky. Kalen Benson from Indiana. Justin Myers from UTEP. So they really did a very good job of getting some reinforcements in the trenches because, yeah, they really needed that trench help for sure. But that's not the only adds on this Colorado roster. They also managed to pick up LaJohntay Wester of Florida Atlantic. He's considered a 4-star kid. Played pretty well for the Owls this year. In addition, you also have some other players like Preston Hodge. Preston Hodge was a pivotal player for that Liberty defense. Went undefeated, win Conference USA. Preston Hodge really cashing in on that. He's playing for Colorado, and he's going to work with what arguably one of the best CBs to ever do it. Oh, that's going to be just an oh-so-special combination right there. Also getting better with those skill guys so that, hey, Shadir Sanders and Travis Hunter, they don't got to do everything on offense. Will Shepard, proven player at Vanderbilt, very proven player. He's got 1 year of college football remaining, going to Colorado. He can certainly play. And yeah, this Colorado team, they might not be, it might not reflect in the record, but Colorado, going to be a fun team to watch. Like they were this past year, they're going to be a fun team to watch. Now, let's talk about another winner, the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss got number 3, and they loaded up on some 5-star kids. They end up signing 5 blue chip guys out of the transfer portal. While they didn't bring as many transfers as Louisville and Colorado, they arguably signed one of the better transfer classes just from a standpoint of just the average quality of player. It's up there with a Texas. It's up there with a, say, Ohio State as well. Ole Miss, while they did not manage to go ahead and sign a ton of people, they signed a couple of blue chippers for sure. Yam Banks, for example, out of South Alabama. I'm really excited for that kid. Yam Banks, We talked about him a couple of podcasts ago. Cam Bakes is a dude, man. He is an absolute dude. Very excited to see what he can do in the SEC next year. I'm really pumped to see him get more attention, and rightfully so. But he's not the only person of note. They also got some reinforcements in the trenches. Diego Pounds from North Carolina. He's a 4-star kid playing offensive tackle. Really trying to reinforce those trenches. Got that Julius Barlow as well. We just finished talking about. And of course, you got Walter Nolan, 5-star kid out of Texas A&M, part of that extremely electric 2022 class. Didn't pan out for Texas A&M at all, but hey, Walter Nolan can play, man. Walter Nolan can absolutely play in the SEC, getting a chance to do so at Ole Miss. Also, one of the better names that I've seen here, Juice Wells. Juice Wells has one more chance at college football. He's a 2019 class of 2019 kid. Bright spot on that South Carolina team. South Carolina they had a rough year, but not Juice Wells. He's got the juice, and he's going to add that juice to that Ole Miss offense this year. And Princely Umanie of Florida, he's coming to Ole Miss as well. He's a transfer from the Florida Gators, a former 4-star kid that's going to be playing at the edge. So some very good pickups here for the Ole Miss Rebels, and rightfully so. And that takes us to probably the biggest winner of or one of the bigger winners. I won't say big winner, because you thought Ole Miss transfer haul was good. Oregon, they got some dudes too. Oregon, and here's the thing with Oregon, right? Oregon not only ended up signing their quarterback of today, they also signed their quarterback of the future as well. They signed Dylan Gabriel in the transfer portal, played at UCF, was at Oklahoma, and now he's here at Oregon. And while Bo Nix is going to go to the NFL and deserves that NFL opportunity, Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon is going to make Oregon a title contender, because when we talk about guys and we're talking about making our early season predictions, one of the factors that I consider is having a quarterback that has experience starting. And Dylan Gabriel has that, but he's not the only quarterback with starting experience. Dante Moore was a true freshman at UCLA. He's coming as well. So there'll probably be a battle between Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore. Dylan Gabriel will likely win it, but Dante Moore could be the quarterback of the future for the Oregon Ducks. And what that does is that it keeps Oregon a realistic contender for years to come with those two moves alone. But of course, it's not always about the quarterbacks now, is it? Because, oh baby, they got some help on the defensive side of the ball, and some big-time receiver, and a big-time receiver too. Actually, a couple of really good corners. Jabbar Muhammad out of Washington. He goes to the rival Oregon. I'm sure Washington is they're not really feeling that, but hey, it is what it is at this point. And then on the opposite end, Cam Alexander. Dude was a star at UTSA. He really popped out at his time at UTSA. So two really good corners. Not to mention they also pick up Jamari Caldwell out of Houston as well. Some extra help on that defensive side of the football. And hey, a little bit of sprinkles in there. How about a former 5-star plus in Evan Stewart from Texas A&M coming to Oregon as well? Gotta have somebody to throw the ball to, and hey, maybe Evan Stewart can emerge as that guy, as he's only a class of 2022 kids, so he has at least 2, maybe 3 years of eligibility. So really like the pickups for the Oregon Ducks. And finally, the last winner, and specifically I like to give a little bit of love to the folks over in the group of 5. We don't forget about the group of 5 over on this channel by any means. UNLV, man. UNLV, I think it's going to be a little bit of a surprise, because UNLV had their starting quarterback transfer out, Jaden Maliva. He's going to USC. But other than that, they didn't really lose anyone of note. Now, losing Jaden Maliva is going to suck. It's not fun to lose that type of calendar player. But UNLV, they still have the best transfer class of the group of five. And they bring in some talent, man. They do have a little bit of talent coming in. Tony Grimes, corner at Texas A&M, didn't play much at Texas A&M, but was a former 5-star. So hey, listen, Tony Grimes might have something in the tank. And Antonio Doyle. Antonio Doyle is a edge rusher from Jackson State. Was a 4-star recruit in high school. And of course, you got Michael Allen, a running back out of NC State. Could be starting for UNLV here in this upcoming season. So getting multiple starters in your transfer portal class from Power 5 schools, mind you, UNLV is going to be fine. I think they're going to be okay moving forward, even with the loss of Jaden Maiva. And they still have their head coach, by the way, which is also a big plus. He was expected to leave. Could still happen. College football is a crazy, crazy world. But for now, it's got some continuity at UNLV. And hey, maybe they can make a run at that Mountain West title as well. A little bit of a dark horse, dare I say. But now, the not so fun part. I like talking about the winners first because they get me in such a good mood. They really do. But now we gotta talk about some programs that are taking some L's. They're taking some L's early on in the transfer portal. Now, what I will say is that we'll still have spring ball, and I'm sure there's going to be more people entering the transfer portal after the spring ball season. But right now, these are the losers that I'm looking at. I think Troy is one, staying on that group of 5 theme. Troy having a lot more talent entering than leaving right now. They had 16 people leave the transfer portal. They only managed to get 6 guys in on their own. 3 of them are from Power 5 schools, but none of the 6 players that they brought in were really of note, to be honest with you. And also, Troy right now there are FCS programs that have better transfer portal classes than Troy. I'm not joking. Don't take my word for it. Go check on the 247 website. You'll see there's an FCS program or two that has a better they have a better transfer portal class than what Troy does right now. So I would not be surprised if Troy takes a step in the wrong direction, and that's a shame because Troy, they won the Sun Belt. They actually won the Sun Belt. This is a good program, but hey, that's just the business of college football sometimes. Would not be surprised to see Troy take a step back. Speaking of teams that are going to disappoint me to my core when it comes to transfer portal, Clemson. Clemson is a loser in this transfer portal, at least as of so far. Now, when I think of Clemson, Clemson is a really good program. I remember vividly Clemson winning national championships. Actually won multiple national championships. And this was in the middle of Nick Saban arguably in his prime. But seeing what's going on at Clemson, we saw what happened this year at 8-4, and really what the difference is of the Clemson of today and the Clemson of the early to mid 2010s. They don't have elite playmakers on the outside. That's the biggest thing holding Clemson back. And it's been well documented at this point. Dabo's leaving for whatever reason, just not really embraced the transfer portal, or not even embrace it. He's not even using it. He hardly used it last year because last year he brought in one person, a backup quarterback, or he ended up being a backup quarterback. That's it. So they brought in one transfer last year. And so at this point, if you're Dabo Swinney, you would think that if you want to continue to be at or near the top, you gotta at least use the transfer portal. And yet here we are, February 2nd. Transfer portal's been open for a while, couple months at least, and Clemson has not bring in a single person again. Clemson had a disappointing season by their standards. Yes, they were close to 10 wins. They ended up going, I believe, 9-4. But if 8-4 and 9-4 is the new standard, this is the type of results that come from it. Or at least that indicate that you're okay with 8-4, that you're okay with 9-4, not using the tools at your disposal to try to make your team better. And Clemson lost a couple of pretty good players in this transfer portal as well. Andrew Mabuka, he's going to Texas. He played safety for the Clemson Tigers. Toriano Pride was another corner. That's another bigger loss for the Clemson Tiger. They're going to Missouri, another Tiger team. So difficult questions might need to be asked there if you're at Clemson. If they don't use the transfer portal and they go 8-4, 9-4 again, I don't know what you would do. I'm not saying fire Dabo. I think he's earned the right to stay as long as he wants because he did win a national championship. And that is an incredibly hard thing to do. But and it would be different as well if they were recruiting at an elite level. But they're not. It's not bad. It's not even bad. But Clemson, they're recruiting at a very good level, but it's not at an elite level. You know what I'm saying? They're 11th right now in recruiting. So you would think if they were not using the transfer portal at all, you would think that they would be closer to his top 5, and that's just not happening. They're 11th overall when it comes to recruiting, but if you take a holistic picture when you account for the transfer portal as well, they're just 15th. They're behind teams like a Florida State that just won the ACC. They're behind Miami, who, yes, Miami also had its fair share of struggles, but Miami's coming. They're coming for your crown. And so you worry about Clemson possibly falling back to a era of where they're good, but they're not in conversation for national championships like they have been in the 2010s and recently in the early 2020s. They've made the playoffs, the college football playoff, in this decade so far. So hopefully they get it right and they actually use the transfer portal, but they're running out of players to actually get right now. We'll see if they're more aggressive when it comes to the spring portal opening up. Couple other losers. Iowa State, I think, is another one. They have the worst transfer class in the Big 12 right now. Didn't bring anybody of note in the transfer portal. They only brought in 4 players. That is it. They have brought in 4 players, and they also lose Greg Gaines. Greg Gaines going to Rhode Island, of all places. Going to Rhode Island, former 4-star player, leaving Iowa State to go to Rhode Island. A lot more guys that are entering the transfer portal for Iowa State than coming in. They had 14 outgoing transfers. Iowa State had just 4. So Iowa State could be vulnerable not to take a step back because they are going to get the majority of their starters back. They're going to have 20 of 22 starters. So I won't even say that it's going to be a step back, but you wonder about the proven ability of the depth that is behind the starters. And when you're trying to compete for, if you want to compete for conference championships, you want to compete for the college football playoff, and for a handful of teams compete for a national championship. Because as we highlighted in our way too early 2024 predictions, winning a national championship is probably only realistic for 10 to 15 schools going into this season. It's just the nature of the beast. If you want to do those things, you got to have depth. You can't just have a good starting lineup. You got to have a solidified second string as well, a two deep, so to speak, to where if the starter goes down, there's not as much of a gap between the starter and the backup. And football season is always a grind, too. It certainly is a grind. There's no question about that either. So, when you're trying to ensure that you have 40-ish quality players on your roster, having a incoming to outgoing ratio of -10 is not the way to go about it. So, Iowa State, I'm not saying they're going to regress going into 2024, but having them progress might be a different story. They might stagnate a little bit this upcoming season if they don't change their ways in the transfer portal. How about Northwestern? Now, Northwestern has an excuse. Um, Northwestern does have higher academic standards. It has seen so Northwestern has a harder time bringing players in through the transfer portal because those academic requirements. It's what a Stanford has to deal with out west, and then if you want to look out east, Vanderbilt, Duke, Boston College also has to deal with those things as well. So Northwestern has not brought in a single transfer yet either. Now, Northwestern hasn't lost anyone of note in the transfer portal. They only lost 8 guys, but it's a little bit disappointing because they brought in more. They did more in the transfer portal last year. They brought in Ben Bryant, who ended up being the starting quarterback for Northwestern. They brought in a few players as well. So Northwestern can bring players in the transfer portal, but at the same time, this year, for whatever reason, they just haven't decided not to do that yet. They haven't done it. Yeah, you hate to see it, especially with what we got going on with how they're recruiting at the present moment, right? Because Northwestern right now is recruiting. They are at the bottom overall. Out of 18 teams, they are 18th in the Big Ten, and it's not even close. It's not. It's not even close. So, Northwestern, if you're going to be relevant in this new era of Big Ten football, because remember, guys, the Big Ten West is gone. So, Northwestern's schedule is going to get harder now that they don't have more navigatable games in the middle of conference season. And then, depending on how things break with like the Big Ten East and back then, that was a different story. But yeah, tough look for Northwestern right now, not bringing in a single transfer. And then finally, LSU. Honestly, I've been pretty disappointed with the LSU Tigers here in the portal campaign. They lost a significant amount of talent in this transfer portal. I don't think people realize that. Let me give you a list of the blue chip players that are leaving their roster. Logan Diggs, going to Ole Miss. Lance Hurt, former 5-star kid, by the way, going to Tennessee. Jalen Brown, Florida State. Denver Harris, hasn't decided yet, but he's a 4-star kid, even in transfer portal standards. You also have Quincy Liggins going to Colorado. Talked about that a little bit earlier. And Bryce Langston, defensive lineman, he's in that transfer portal as well. Hasn't made a decision as of yet. And yet, total of 17 players leaving the transfer portal for the LSU Tigers. Now, it's not all bad. They did bring in a few good players, right? They brought in CJ Daniels. He was a wide receiver at Liberty, was a top target for Caden Salter. So CJ Daniels will come in and possibly make an impact. They also brought in Savion Thomas on the other side. He was a wide receiver at Mississippi State. And probably the biggest portal ad that they could get is Jordan Gilbert, a 4-star safety out of Texas A&M. They brought him in through the portal. Now, big reason why LSU was not in that college football playoff SEC championship, I had LSU winning the SEC, and I was wrong. Admittedly, I was wrong. But a big reason why I was wrong was because the defense was atrocious. And unfortunately, I just don't think that they've did enough to really solidify themselves more defensively. Are they going to be better? Yes, but is it enough to move the needle? I don't know. I don't know what that answer is going to be. Um, yeah, I'm just disappointed in what they did in the transfer portal, I guess is really what I'm trying to say. I was hoping that LSU would do more, especially defensively, and I'm not impressed. I am simply not impressed. They did bring in a couple of other DBs, but I don't know if they're impact players though. That's the thing. Guys that are gonna really truly be a difference. I don't see it. I don't see it. So I got LSU as a loser because of that, among some other teams. But hey, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Who do you think is not getting enough attention in a good way in the transfer portal? And who do you think is more down horrendous than what we have seen thus far and maybe is not being talked about enough? Definitely let me know down in that comment section. Definitely would appreciate if y'all had something to say about that. But got one more thing that I wanted to touch on here tonight, and that is we have a new head coach. There is a new head coach opening. Imagine that. There is a new head coach opening up because Jeff Hafley was okay at Boston College, but he wasn't great. I think it was just one of those things where Jeff Hafley, okay, so it's kind of like the Mario Cristobal situation that was at Miami before not that's not Mario Cristobal. No, Manny Diaz. I don't know where Mario Cristobal is the current coach, but Manny Diaz was the coach at Miami, and he was fine. It wasn't fireable, but it wasn't, up to snuff. It was like he was a C minus coach at Miami. And then Mario Cristobal was on the market. He was a Miami guy. And so what they ended up doing was they fired their current coach at the time so that Mario Cristobal is going to come in and, hey, make a difference for the Miami program going forward. So it's kind of, for me, when I see what's happening at at Boston College, um, Jeff Hafley just kind of gives that same vibe. Okay, Jeff Hafley wasn't great at Boston College, but he did just lead them to a bowl game, right? He did just lead them to a bowl game. He was at Boston College for 4 years, and he was just kind of average. He was a very average tenure. In his 4 years at Boston College, he was 6-5, 6-6, 3-9, and then 7-6 of his past year, including a bowl win, which was the only bowl appearance that he made, by the way, while he was at Boston College. So a very average tenure at Boston College. He is now going to take the defensive coordinator job for the Green Bay Packers, which, for their own right, they are going there to, a team that is on the rise itself. So, regardless of whether you believe what the reason is behind him departing, could be because he just thinks it's a good opportunity, or some say, and I think there's some truth to this as well, he just might be tired of the current landscape of college football. And that's just something that I think what I was worried about when we see the lawlessness in NIL and what we've seen in the lawlessness of the transfer portal, what's going on with, tampering that is certainly happening at the moment. We're going to see some of these coaches that might have a lot more left in the tank. They're going to leave college football for the time being because they're just tired of dealing with it. It's not that they're afraid of hard work. It takes a lot to be a head coach of a college football program. It also takes a lot to be a coach at the NFL. It takes a lot of hard work. They're the type of people where you give them 25 hours, you give them an extra hour out of the day, they will take it. They will take it and use it to work and better their programs, whether it's at the college or the professional level. But I do think that this could happen a little bit more. And shoot, we might be seeing some rumors going on with Chip Kelly allegedly being linked to the offensive coordinator job for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's thinking about doing the same thing, which it makes it more imperative for Boston College to hire a new head coach and do it as soon as possible. Because if there is truth to that, and Chip Kelly actually gets the offensive coordinator job for the Las Vegas Raiders and leaves UCLA because of that, it doesn't matter how much longer the Boston College job is open. I guarantee you, UCLA will have their job filled before Boston College does. If Boston College hasn't made a decision, should Chip Kelly leave for the NFL? And why I believe this, and while UCLA may not necessarily have their ducks in a row as an administration over there in Los Angeles, could you really argue the same thing for Boston College? Honestly, do you think Boston College athletics is well run at the moment? Legitimately. And not only that, UCLA, they are in a better conference than Boston College. UCLA will have access to a better talent pool than what Boston College will have to work through, like in the high school recruiting ranks. Because even with the transfer portal, high school recruiting is still important. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They also are going to have better weather at UCLA. So coaches want to go to nicer weather places. LA is, from a weather standpoint, is nicer than Boston. I don't think there's really any argument on that at all. So with all those factors in mind, if the UCLA job comes open, in my opinion, I see the UCLA job being more desirable than this head coaching job at Boston College, which comes back to my original point here yet again. I think that Boston College needs to fill that head coaching job as soon as they can. And as of right now, they haven't filled it yet. But that being said, I do think there's a few candidates out there that I truly believe would make a lot of sense in regards to who could be a good candidate for this Boston College job. I'm going to name 4 people, 2 that are a little bit more realistic, and then 2 that are going to be a little bit more long shots, right? So, starting with the realistics, how about the head coach at Toledo, Jason Kendall? He's coaching at Toledo right now as a head coach, and it wouldn't be the first time that he would be linked to a head coaching job in the Northeast. He was actually a finalist for the Syracuse job. Syracuse ended up going in a different direction, but Jason Kendall was a finalist. He was very strongly considered by the University of Syracuse, and there's good reason why. He's done a very good job at Toledo since he's taken over that program in 2015. During his time in 2015, he's gone 65-35. He's putting together a very good record, even especially within the MAC as well. Because, so the MAC is an interesting conference in itself, in that culture matters more. Culture matters at a lot of places, but I think particularly in the MAC, culture is extremely important, and coaching competency is extremely important, because the top of the MAC and the bottom of the MAC, when it comes to not only athletic facilities, but also when it comes to their NIL collectives and what they can shell out for the transfer portal, is very similar. It's the most similar top to bottom out of any conference in FBS Division I football. So being a good coach matters more. Jason Candle has shown he can get it done, man. He's taken Toledo to the MAC championship game last couple of years. He actually led them to a MAC title in 2022, was a runner-up this year, ended up losing to Miami of Ohio. He's also an offensive-minded coach, trying to get that offense moving, kind of a different direction than what Jeff Hafley was. And so Jason Candle, I think, would be a really good candidate. I think that would make a lot of sense, but it's not the only candidate that I think would make sense here. Troy Calhoun, the head coach out of Air Force, you could say the same thing for him. It is incredibly hard, especially in today's college football landscape, to win at a military academy, given that the military academies, they can't offer out NIL money. They can't use the transfer portal because their mission as military academies is producing officers for the United States military. But in spite of those hurdles, even before NIL, Troy Calhoun has found ways to make Air Force a very consistent Group of 5 program. Troy Calhoun, he has been the head coach at Air Force since 2007, putting together a very strong record at Air Force. 130 and 82 is what this man's record is. So while it's tough to win at service academies, if he was given an opportunity to go to a place like Boston College, granted, understandably, Boston College may not be the most attractive job. At Boston College, they would have more resources for him to work through. The hurdles that are in place when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal for the Air Force wouldn't be in place for Boston College. So he would have more ways to acquire talent for his football team. The only question for Troy Calhoun is, can he have an offensive coordinator that knows how to run a different style of offense? Because we all know Air Force runs a triple option. I don't think that would transfer over to ACC football. Don't think it would happen. Georgia Tech running for a lot of years, and then they got away from that just a few years ago. But they were a triple option team too. They had to change. Can Troy Calhoun either change his personal offensive philosophy or get an offensive coordinator that is willing to call the plays? That's really the only question with Troy Calhoun. But no question, he's a very good coach. He is a very good coach. So those are the two realistic options. But how about a couple of long shots here? And this one's certainly a long shot. Hear me out. Just hear me out real quick. Bill Belichick. What say him? Bill Belichick could be a guy to watch out for. Bill Belichick, he's not going to be an NFL head coach this year. He's interviewed for multiple jobs. He was linked to the Atlanta Falcons job. Didn't get it. He's not going to be an NFL head coach. Not happening. So he still has interest in coaching. If he's interviewing, he certainly is interested in coaching, but if he wants to be a head coach, it's going to have to be at the college level. Why not go back to a place where you're still beloved in Boston? I mean, the man has 5 Super Bowl rings, so no question he could win. And it's not a complete shot in the dark either. The owner of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft, he's actually on the board of trustees at Boston College. So right there's a connection. There's familiarity. The only question is, can he recruit? And it wouldn't be a long-term answer for your coach either. That's the two concerns there. Because Bill Belichick is on the older side, let's call it how it is. So it wouldn't be a long-term answer, but it would be an intriguing choice. And then the other one that I was thinking about just this afternoon, actually, was how about Matt Ryan, man? Matt Ryan's retired from the NFL effectively, and his football career is coming to an end. Matt Ryan's a Boston College alumni. Now, he would need to surround himself with coordinators that are consistent and have experience if they would go in that direction. Because to my knowledge, I don't think Matt Ryan has coached ever. He's been obviously playing in the NFL. It's a very good NFL career. And he's a Boston College alumni. So if there is somebody that could sell Boston College, Matt Ryan could be that guy because he came from there. Actually led Boston College to one of their best seasons in school history, at least in modern college history in the 2000s. So that's just kind of what I've been thinking about a lot today. And it just goes to show that even though that we're in this O word that some people like to throw out, there's still a lot going on. And so it just has me very excited for what's coming up around the corner because we're 1 week closer, man. We are 1 week closer to a new college football season. But the news ain't stopped coming. So that means we ain't stopping covering anything here college football related anytime soon. So hope you enjoyed the podcast tonight. We ended up being a little bit spicier. We ended up being a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but hey, we're just enjoying every single moment, man. If you enjoyed this podcast, it's a little bit of a longer one than I thought it was going to be, but if you enjoyed it and you made it all the way to the end, you're a real MVP. You are truly an MVP from the bottom of my heart. And two other ways so you can show that you're a real MVP, hit that like button. Hit that like button for me because hitting that like button does help me out with that YouTube algorithm, does get it out to more college football fans like yourselves. In addition, you also have a chance, a big chance actually, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be an A1 since day one. And so if you want to be that A1 since day one, how about you go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me? Join this college football community that we're trying to build from the ground up. That would be awesome, man. And I welcome everybody. I welcome everybody, regardless of who you choose to root for in this college football world, man. So that being said, I'm going to sign off. Hopefully can get this out tomorrow, maybe even Sunday. Only time will tell. But that being said, I'm your host, Jake, of the Any Given Saturday podcast, where anything could happen on any given Saturday. And I just hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Good night, everybody.